Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It seems like we can't get a break as KOTOR fans, huh? Now, I managed to catch wind of this a little bit earlier than most outlets and people on Twitter, and as I'm recording this video, I'm not entirely sure how the community is reacting as of yet, but my instincts tell me that if this news, gains any kind of traction, people are going to suggest this means the KOTOR remake is over, the KOTOR remake is dead, blah 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 blah, the same stuff that I've been hearing for 2 years at this point. But look, I get it, because today Embracer released an open letter to their investors and their shareholders and whatnot, essentially stating that the company isn't doing as well as they wanted, and that they kind of want to shift their business model from investing in acquisitions of other studios and IP into a company that's more naturally financially stable, and into a company that has a good cash flow. And in layman's terms, this is essentially Embracer saying the company isn't making as much money as our shareholders and our investors want, and so we need to restructure the company, we need to sell off some studios, we need to stop development on some things, we need to fire some people, etc, etc. And judging by some of the base reactions that I have seen online, most people are just reading this title or reading the kind of, the TLDR, and assuming that because they're trying to change their focus and because they've admitted they're going to stop development on some projects, that this means the KOTOR remake is basically screwed. However, if you ignore the title and you actually get into the meat and drink of the open letter that they did release today, and you read through all the uninteresting bits and whatnot, you'll notice that truthfully, this isn't likely going to affect the KOTOR remake. And I don't think we should be getting worried about this at all. If anything, this might actually be a good thing for the KOTOR remake, and I will get into why. So, first and foremost, let's take a look at the actual open letter. I'm not going to read everything in this letter because it is rather long, but I will pull out the most important bits that pertain to the KOTOR remake in some way, and if you're interested in this kind of thing generally, I would recommend reading the letter for yourself. This morning, we announced a restructuring program across the Embracer Group that will make us a leaner, stronger, and more focused, self-sufficient company. The program presented today will transform us from our current heavy investment mode to a highly cash flow generative business this year. It will enable us to meet the worsening economy and market reality as a strong company, and it will fundamentally change our prioritization of growth with raised capital towards optimization and growth based on our own cash flows. The program will lower our net debt significantly. After completion of this program, we will generate growth in profitability with less business risk and with higher margins in the PC/console segment over the coming years. This, in turn, will give us the freedom to continue to grow and deliver the high-quality experiences our players really value. The initial phase, which is initiated immediately, mainly targets cost savings across the group. The next phase, which also starts immediately, will require further analysis to determine specific actions, and the last phase will focus on internal consolidation, further resource utilization, and more synergies across the group. Embracer currently engages close to 17,000 people, and while that number will be lower by the end of the year, it is too early to give an exact forecast on this. The reality is that the quicker we act, the sooner we emerge as a stronger company. The actions will include, but not limited to, closing or divestments of some studios and the termination or pausing of some ongoing game development projects. It will also include decreased spending on non-development costs such as overhead and other operating expenses. We will reduce third-party publishing and put greater focus on internal IP and increase external funding of large-budget games. All announced significant releases will still be released as planned. There is more to this open letter, speaking more about the industry and the people in the industry and Embracer itself that it's going to affect, but like I said, if you want to read it all, I would highly recommend it, but these are the most important things in regards to the KOTOR remake that I think are important. So the most important bit of information that I think is in this entire letter is one section towards the end. The potential impact from the program of future game releases will almost entirely be around unannounced projects. All announced significant releases will still be released as planned. Now, I don't know about you guys or whether you've been following Embracer at all, but they have stated on numerous occasions before the whole debacle with Aspyr that the KOTOR Remake is one of the biggest games in the company's history. Not only that, but it is one of their most highly anticipated releases on a financial level, and furthermore, it is one of their biggest investments into a project they have ever made on a budgetary level. As I've stated in videos before, there is over 100 million in budget for this game, which is very, very high, and this was the number attributed to the project as they took ownership over Aspyr. This doesn't consider any of the pre-production money that went into it from Aspyr themselves, nor does it take into any consideration any of the money that Sony supposedly invested, and this likely doesn't include many of the marketing costs either, because by the looks of it, that's mostly what Sony are doing. This doesn't even include potential further investments into the game as development has gone on. The second thing that I want to bring up from this letter that I think some people are going to take out of context is the section that states, "We will reduce third-party publishing and put greater focus on internal IP and increase external funding of larger budget games." Now, most importantly, third-party publishing does not mean the KOTOR Remake, which is something, as I mentioned, I think some people may take out of context. But that's just me assuming, maybe no one will read into this. But the KOTOR Remake is a first-party project in regards to Embracer and Saber. Third-party projects in this context are games that are created by independent studios externally, and Embracer will then publish that studio's game for them without them owning them or the IP. The KOTOR Remake, by definition, is a AAA first-party title for Embracer because it's created by a studio they own, it's a license that they specifically have the rights to work with. And this leads me on to my next point about why I actually think this could be a good thing for the KOTOR Remake. They state specifically that they want to put a greater focus on their internal IP. Now, this is total conjecture on my part, but they made a clear distinction here between owned IP and internal IP. The KOTOR Remake is technically an internal IP controlled by Embracer. It's not owned by Embracer, but it's internal. This means that the KOTOR Remake comes under the bracket of one of their internal productions that they consider an internal IP made by one of their first-party studios, which means more focus may be going into the game. And let's be honest with ourselves here, if the KOTOR Remake doesn't come under the bracket of announced significant releases, then I honestly don't know what does. If you've been sort of nosing around the game industry as of late, StarWars Outlaws was recently announced and I think it looks great, but StarWars Outlaws is one of the most viewed games of the entire Summer Games Fest. People that do these kind of things, rack up the numbers of how many views they get online and whatnot in terms of direct trailers and the gameplay showcases. And in regards to the Xbox showcase, Star Wars Outlaws was the most viewed game from the entire thing, beating out things like Fable and even Starfield, one of the most anticipated games in Bethesda's history, and that is the power of the Star Wars franchise by name. So, taking everything into account, the KOTOR Remake is considered one of the biggest and most potentially profitable projects inside of Embracer right now, and regardless of whether or not they're shifting their focus as a company, I genuinely believe that the KOTOR Remake is safe based on the things they've said, and that the game isn't in any real danger. I've also seen a few weird takes on Twitter of people saying this probably means they're going to get rid of Saber Interactive, and I wouldn't read into that at all if you come across those tweets. Saber is literally Embracer's powerhouse studio. It's like Sony getting rid of Naughty Dog. Most of Embracer's big releases in the coming fiscal year are all from Saber, so yeah, I really don't think they're getting rid of Saber out of all the studios they could get rid of. But with that said, this is the gaming industry, and it is full of surprises, so who knows. Anyway guys, let me know what you think about all of this news in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd appreciate if you give this video a like and a share so we can get this news moving. It helps me out a great deal and it spreads a more optimistic perspective on things within the Star Wars community. If you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing to join the biggest growing Knights of the Old Republic community on YouTube, and come and follow me on Twitter, which is where I talk about everything KOTOR off of YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.